All right. Well, welcome everybody to Volunteer to Work, a presentation about the process of starting first through volunteering and eventually finding employment. Let me bring up my PowerPoint. All right. Well, welcome to our presentation from volunteering to employment. And we are going to have a panel of presenters today. And so I will first start by introducing them. One of our panelists is going to be Jay Deshevsky, and he is currently a coordinator at TRIO Student Support Services at Arizona State University, Tempe campus. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, George. I'm really happy to be here. And thanks everyone for joining.
Another one of our panelists is David Carey. He is an innovative enhancement specialist. Enhancement specialist at Arizona Statewide Independent Living Council, or AZ-SILC. Welcome, David.
Thank you, George.
Our next presenter our panelist is going to be Calvin Cook, and he is an alumni relations champion at Diverse Ability Incorporated. Welcome,
Yes,
Calvin.
Thank you, George.
And then myself, George Garcia. I am Executive Director at Southwest Institute for Families and Children. So what we're going to talk about today is the idea of finding employment through the volunteer process, or sort of that way of first volunteering to get to the job that we want. Now, employment is a big issue amongst people with disabilities. In March of 2023, the Labor Department showed that for people with disabilities between the ages of 16 to 64, there was an unemployment rate of 9%. Now, when you compare that to people without disabilities, their unemployment rate was 3.5%. So as you can see, there's a lot more people with disabilities who are unemployed. So it's a very big problem in our community. So when we start talking about how can we fix that, or what are some of the things that we can do to increase employment among people with disabilities, is that we have to get away from the notion that we have to go straight into employment. You don't have to start with full-time employment. But what you can do is start looking for volunteer opportunities in your community. And that can be anything from joining organizations and being part of their volunteer groups, or being part of a project that requires some volunteers. What's important is to get involved in the things that you love. So if your passion is to work with people with disabilities, look for those volunteer opportunities that you can get involved in organizations that work with people with disabilities. Or if your passion is to work with animals, look for volunteer opportunities to work with organizations that work with animals. Another way that you can start to get involved is to contact your local self-advocacy groups. Self-advocacy groups are groups of people with disabilities that learn to advocate for themselves and advocate for others. But it's also a great way to learn and share resources, share stories about what has worked for others on some of the issues that they may be facing in their lives. The more you get involved with self-advocacy groups, the more you realize that maybe somebody's going through the same thing that you're going through, like for instance, finding employment, and you get to learn about what they've done that's worked for them. So it's always a great option to start to get involved. When you start getting involved in the community, in volunteering, there are some things that you gain. You gain experience. One of the things that you get to do is you get to learn more about the work that you picture yourself doing in the future. So for instance, you might, if your dream is to be a social worker, you might be volunteering in organizations that involve social work. And so you get to see what exactly do they do? What does that job entail? And you get to learn from that. You also get to learn from others with disabilities on how they're able to work. So what works for them? What accommodations do they use? How do they do their job? And that gives you an idea of what you'll be able to do when you start working. You also gain experience in working with others in different environments. So the work environment, going to an office or an organization or working in groups. And then finally, you also gain confidence in your own abilities, right? You get to learn what are you able to do. Maybe you weren't sure that you could work. And so by volunteering, you start to gain confidence that you can do this. You can start employment. You could start doing the things that a job that you dream about, requires you to do. Also, by volunteering, you start to network. And that means you start to build connections with people. By networking, you get to build a positive reputation about yourself. The more you get involved, the more people start learning about your abilities and what you're all about. And then pretty soon people start saying, you know what? That person might be a good candidate for a job. You get to make connections with possible employers. So as you start working with organizations, you start making those connections with people that might need to hire you in the future. So they have you in mind. And then so you build those professional relationships. You build relationships with people that might be future coworkers or future bosses, future employers. And that really helps you get your foot in the door, per se, on future job prospects. Then you also get to seize the opportunity. So as you volunteer, you'll start to see that things become available. Maybe somebody has a job opening or somebody has a new project that they're starting and they need to hire people. So then, you're able to apply for those jobs. And with those networks that you've made and those connections that you've made, it really increases your chances of finding a job. You also may be able to carve out your own job. So as you volunteer with an organization, maybe you start doing something that organization didn't even know that they needed. And you become a very good person or candidate to do that job, and they create a job to keep you around. So there's lots of great things on how you can get involved in your community so that you can eventually become employed. Now, with that said, I want to open it up to our panelists, because I want to learn more about them and what they've done to find employment.
Let me go first, George.
Hold on. So yeah, I'm gonna start asking you guys questions about how did you first start getting involved? So go ahead, David. How did you first start getting involved in in what is now your employment?
I got involved, do a lot of volunteer work. When I went over to ASU, I got involved with the disability ADA coordinator. And the coordinator job was to go around and look at the facility to make sure that the school was accessible. So between that and one of the employee coordinators over at ASU, they got me involved in a lot of activities around campus. And one of the main thing was I would go around campus, I would check out accessibility of all the entrances and doorways. And then that led to being part of the ADA Accessibility Committee, which monitor all the venues, football, basketball, track, gammage, to make sure they were accessible as well. And so in addition to that, I also got involved in, at the time, the name was Arizona Bridge to Independent Living, and which is now Ability 360. And so I would go and do peer mentoring over to nursing homes, hospitals, and meet with consumers who has just sustained an accident and became disabled, whether paralysis, TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, or different type of situations. So as a result, I was kind of doing a couple of things. One, I was working on ADA committee in regards to the schools, whether it's ASU main campus, stadium committee, or the new campus in East Mesa, ASU, and or the West campus. Downtown campus was midtown. So this was in the mid 90s. And then at the same time I was doing meeting with consumers, peer mentoring. So as a result, that one thing on campus led to me organizing a technology fair. And that was quite successful and really enjoyable. Really enjoyed doing so, uh, uh, um, organizing it. And so, and then what that led to is putting together a resource guide for students who are disabled that were coming to town, whether it's hotels that were accessible, or whether it's places to buy technology equipment. So that was a whole different thing. So as a result, I got a job working at ASU Disability Resources. And then the peer mentoring job I did led to me getting the job as an outreach educator for African American community. So I would go out to nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and I would tell them about the services that Arizona Bridge and Independent Living had. And so the person who hired me to do that, she ended up leaving Able and going over to the state. And she brought me over there working for, back then was Arizona Disability, Arizona ADA office. So that office, I worked there for 8 months and by doing technical assistance for those who had questions about the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so that's basically how I got my start in regards to, so I'll leave it at that and move on. But in a nutshell, that's how I got my start is I did a lot of volunteer work, a lot of networking that led to some of the things that I now do now in my current current and past jobs. Thanks.
Yeah. Jay, how did you first start getting involved?
So back in the early 2000s, around I believe it was like 2001, 2000. I was a student at the ASU, undergraduate student, and I had received word of a research project being connected by two PhD faculty members that later went on to form a real prominent nonprofit within the state of Arizona, very prominent, very popular too, and throughout that group, it was it doubled as a research project, but also like a real self-advocacy group, because we bounced ideas off of each other. We shared ideas, we grew together, we educated each other. And upon graduation from ASU, while I continued that, I had lots of networking opportunities under my belt, which I fostered, I kept, and so those led to more networking opportunities and more connections, more rubbing elbows with those in the community. And then I went on to other self-advocacy groups, where I got to do experiences like, for example, testify at the state legislature with self-advocates, or even do further networking, attending conferences, again, further networking. And so those led to my first job. And then when I went to get my master's degree, further networking, further opportunities, further doors opening, and pretty much it repeated as necessary, and it still does, which is always great. You're always networking with those in the community, always fostering relationships, fostering those networks, and opening more doors. And so, as George and David said, it really needs to start with, not so much full-time employment, not so much part-time. Volunteerism is really great, and don't be put off if it's not paid, because that's how the saying it's all about who you know comes into play, because you need to start somewhere, and that is the best place.
Thank you. Kelvin, how did you first start getting involved?
One moment, please. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so for me, growing up with a disability, I was not really connected with the disability community, as much as I am now. And I think my start began around like 16. I went to this conference my mom had taken me to, this disability related conference, and that like helped to open my eyes about like the benefit of being connected to the disability community. And then around 18, I started to go to Ability 360. It had a different name back then. But yeah, I started going there. And then I started to get more comfortable being out in the community. And then I was wanting to pursue my education, and I needed to get my GED. So I was in the process of doing that. I was taking classes over at the Friendly House, which is an organization here in Central Phoenix, South Central Phoenix. And they had an opportunity that they were advertising while I was taking my classes. It was the Phoenix Workforce Program, which was a 5-week program. The first week they would like put you through this job training, and then for the next 4 weeks you would work 40 hours a week, and you would receive compensation for it. And this was happening over at the Goodwill, And after I finished that first week, they weren't really sure like where to place me, because like they place you at an organization that you're interested in, at an organization that has work that you're interested in doing. And we were kind of like having an issue like locating an adequate organization for myself. So I was hanging around Goodwill. I was helping like file and like do like office work. And then I met Chris Perkins, who was working over at Southwest Institute for Families and Children. And she offered to take me in over there. So I went over there, and that's where I met George, and yeah. And then yeah, I found out that they were overseeing a self-advocacy group, which was the Youth Action Council of Arizona at the time. And then I started going to those meetings every first Saturday. And then yeah, I started to get around people with disabilities, and I was hearing what they were talking about, how I could relate to their situations, and then I kept going every first Saturday, and then being involved with them, I was able to get connected with People First of Arizona, which is another self-advocacy group, and then being at Southwest Institute for Families and Children, I was hearing about the transition conferences, and I would go to those, and then I would meet more people with disabilities and make more connections. And then while all this is happening, I knew about Arizona Youth Leadership Forum. I had known about that, but I was not choosing to attend that summer program, which is for youth, until 2019. That's when I finally attended it, which was my last opportunity because they only allow up to 29 years old. But I attended that program, and then from there, other doors were opened for me that led to me receiving what position I have over at Diversibility Incorporated, which oversees Arizona Youth Leadership Forum. So yeah, it's like um starting way back in the beginning, and like me just making that choice to get out in the community. I learned about all these other opportunities, and yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. As for me, I learned uh, about a program or a project being done by the Office for Children with Special Healthcare Needs, or OCEAN, as they say. And they were doing a project on youth in transition. And I was just out of college and looking to see what I was going to be doing. And so I learned about that program, and that's how I got involved. And that's where I met Jay. And Jay told me about some of the work that he was doing at the uh, Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities. And I joined his group to see what he was doing because he had meetings, and I went, and that's where I met David. And David told me about a job opportunity as a youth program coordinator at Southwest Institute, and that's how it was my first job. So, it led from volunteering to employment. The next question that I have for the group is, what kind of experience did you gain, in the programs or projects that you were involved in before your employment that has helped you in your current job? So, David, why don't you tell us about the experiences that you've gained?
Thanks, George. Well, as far as me, the experience I gained, I like I said, I mentioned earlier, I did organize a technology fair, and also I did outside with the community. So in regards to making sure things were accessible, accessibility issues, working with the public, taking phone calls from businesses or individuals in regards to ADA accessibility. And so as a result, when I got my job, when I got my, well, in doing this, I had a couple jobs. Like I said, I did outreach work in, I did, it was a part-time job at Able doing outreach to the minority community. And then I got the job on the phone, doing phone work at the state. And so then that was both part-time jobs. And when I got to my full-time job as a disability advocate specialist, that really, those previous jobs really helped because they entitle working with the public and also organizing events. So currently over the last several years, I would organize health fairs, conferences, and other events that I put on a monthly or yearly basis. And then in regards to working with the public, it with the ADA committee, it gave me the opportunity to work with organizations and agencies such as Valley Metro and other city programs. So they all tied into one another because when I had to go out and speak, the fact that we one of the other jobs that I had to do was lobbying, and so that would entail me to go down to the state capitol and speak to our lawmakers about particular issues, whether it's funding for healthcare, funding for access to healthcare, employment opportunities, or education. So that speaking opportunity I did in the previous part-time work and leading up to that part-time work really paid off in allowing me to feel comfortable going in public and speaking to public officials or city officials or who else there may be in regards to advocating for appropriate services that will improve the lives of people with disabilities. Thanks.
Yeah. Jay, what kind of how did the experiences that you gained through volunteering help you now in your current job?
So from the beginning, I, beginning with SWI, went to the DD Council, Developmental Disabilities Council, within our state, then went to ABLE, Ability 360, gone through Ocean, all of those. So it really put into perspective how people do network, what networking means, how people work together, how people might not work together and go their separate ways, but and what self-advocacy means, what the independent living movement means, what the disability rights movements mean, who are the prominent figures, what do we need to push forward, why we need to push those things forward, and really an overall message of we can't rest on our laurels, otherwise we don't win as a collective whole. And it's not about like leaving people behind because some people have different opportunities. Everybody has different opportunities, and so rather than the notion of leaving people behind, it's more about we're all bringing people forward no matter what we do. So you learn about all these movements and about like what organizations do and how they work together and how to network and foster those relationships, so that you can take information back and go to conferences, how to advocate, how to ask questions, how to internalize the information and work together and move forward so that you could put that information into practice. What, for example, UCEDS stands for University Centers for Excellence on Developmental Disabilities. So how universities affect the landscape moving forward. So lots of things of how to network and how to work, not only within your state, but state to state to state, and how to inform change, how to legislate to testify at the state capitol, how to influence those who are the policymakers. So you learn a whole lot of things, and learning, just as you're, say, a college student, a high school student, volunteer, worker, learning doesn't stop. It's always lifelong. So things build, and definitely expect them to build.
No, absolutely. Calvin, what experiences did you gain through your volunteering and your projects that you were part of that have helped you in your employment?
So as the alumni relations champion at Diversibility Incorporated, I'm pretty much the youth advisor, the point of contact, and I do what I can to assist the youth that we work with over there. I've only been there since 2020 of August. So I've had like many years of volunteering and I think that like being involved with self-advocacy groups and volunteering my time, attending these conferences, whether or not I received stipends for my time or not. I feel like all that experience has been very helpful. I've been able to do a lot of public speaking, a lot of these presentations, and that's I've noticed that that these experiences have helped me to do what job I do now when I host Zoom meetings, when I do presentations. Being involved with self-advocacy groups has allowed me to work on the team. So that helps me now when I have to work with my coworkers on the project. The experience being involved with self-advocacy groups, as I mentioned, the team aspect, it's allowed me to like practice with collaborating and communicating my preferences and what I'm hoping to see for the team. So I would say that the experiences of communicating have really been built upon through my volunteering work. In all my years prior to employment, and that is something that I really do value, that I had the opportunity to gain prior to employment, and I can imagine how much more difficult it would be now if I was not able to gather that experience prior. So I am an advocate for volunteering. Thank you, George.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think that one of the best things that I gained from my experiences was that, for instance, working or volunteering at Ocean, we put together a conference, a youth in transition conference, where I was able to present, and that gave me the experience of, what does it take to put together a conference, and what does it take to be able to hold a room and present for an hour at a time, and learning about just being able to handle presentations. Also, by volunteering, I was able to make those connections and learn about different organizations and different resources and programs that are out there. And so now when I work, and I work with people with disabilities, especially through our self-advocacy groups, when people need resources or they need information about what's out there, I've had that experience where I've been able to learn about different organizations and I'm able to share that experience or that knowledge with people and say, here's where you can go to find this kind of resource, or this is what you need to do in order to reach your goals. So it's been really helpful. The next question that I have for you guys is, and you guys have touched on it a little bit already, but tell me more about those network connections that you made, and do they still come in helpful, and do you continue to make networking connections even now as you're employed?
Thanks, George. Yeah, as far as the connections, you always continue to grow it by making new connections. I know myself, I'm a little bit older, so many of my connections have since retired and have moved on out to current positions. But and so as a result, you continue to make those new connections, especially in my situation where I have, after having one job for about 20 plus years, I moved over to a different role. And so kind of a different arena. And so as a result, I have to make a whole new set of um, connection because it's a whole new job and deal with a whole new group of people. So yes, it's always good to have those connections, but depending on your situation, you have to keep growing, and the way to grow is keep making those connections and keep learning on a daily basis. Thanks.
Jay, what about you? Do
I
you still make
definitely
those
echo what.
connections?
Oh, sorry. I definitely echo what Dave said. Connections, they grow, they regrow. People do move on. People do stay in the same state, move states. I think social media has really changed the landscape, because I remember times where like you would have your connections to track them down and say maybe you want some letters of recommendations, but now it's more like about just the contact information, and so applications could be online. Social media avenues, like for example Facebook, LinkedIn is really huge for that as well, because you get to sort of make a quasi resume, sort of an online version, write your strengths, but also you need to wherever you go, A, foster those connections, establish new ones, B, realize that for anybody, no job is forever, no contract is forever, no connection is forever. So that's why it is definitely important to grow and regrow. Always network, always meet people. Don't be afraid, no matter who they are, no matter what titles they hold, no matter what realm they're in. So I really think it's important to always be active, always be social, no matter in what platform.
No, yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, being able to, share information about what you're doing and learning about what other people are doing through social media is a great way of keeping those connections together, or establishing new connections. Kelvin, tell us a little bit about how networking helped you and continues to help you.
I'm noticing that I'm noticing how cool it is that when you do have these opportunities to present or like be involved with self-advocacy groups, I'm noticing how cool it is to network. I've had some individuals who I have worked with in the past reach out to me to do other other things. They've offered me other opportunities to present, and like it's just cool that when you get out there and you get involved in the community and you start creating these connections with other individuals, what can amount. And then as some of the other panelists have mentioned, it provides us an opportunity to reach out if we're in need of something, or like if we just want some advice, and we have that individual who we can reach out to. And yeah, some of these connections, they do like fizzle out, and um all of these years though, it's taught me that it's good to create these new connections, introduce yourself to people if you're at a conference, and yeah, it can be a little intimidating at first, yeah, with practice makes progress, and you're only gonna get better the more that you do it, the more that you speak to others and you reach out to them. And yeah, you never know what can amount, your next opportunity could be right around the corner, waiting for you to take that chance at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think, you know, by networking, by meeting people, my connections with Jay and then David, and that ultimately led to my employment. It helped me get to where I am now. But I continue to make those connections. I've learned to partner or to make connections with other organizations and the heads of other organizations, and that has allowed me then to develop programs and projects and apply for grants with other organizations that have really helped my organization continue to succeed just because of those network connections that I've been able to make. So it's a continual process, as has been mentioned already. You grow connections, you develop them, and sometimes some fade away because people move on, and then you develop new connections, and you're always looking to strengthen um, those bonds with other people, because you do not know really when your next opportunity is going to come up, but when it does, you have to be ready to take it, right? So the next question that I have for everybody is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't said already? I'm opening it up to you all. Is there anything that you would want to add that we haven't said already?
One of the really main foundations that I want to explore too is education. And I know that not everybody approaches educational experience in the same way. Maybe they want to get their associates, bachelor's, masters, etc. Maybe they want to explore something else, but there has to be a foundation, and that is a great place to start, a great place to promote yourself. And from personal experience, I think promoting yourself is very difficult. I don't like talking about myself too much, but still, there comes a point where yes, you have to, definitely promote yourself, talk yourself up, make sure that you're really putting yourself forward, because together, like as we form a united front, getting that education, getting that employment, we help to crush the status quo. We help to change the landscape, because rather than putting into perspective that if we don't, we have the other side winning, the other side saying that we can't do things. So we need to establish a culture of can. Otherwise, we lose.
The only thing I enjoyed is that all of us are Sun Devils here, all four of us on the panel. But I myself can't speak for George and Calvin and everybody else, but I use book rehab services. So for those of you that want to get employed and your goal outcome is to become employed, book rehab is a great resource. Vocational rehabilitation is a great resource to reach out to for employment assistance that will get you to your goal of becoming and staying employed. And you can get that information through rehabilitation, Arizona RSA, which is Rehabilitation Services Administration. And so I'm sure if you have questions, we can get you hooked up those services with that connection, with that contact information if you need it. So they're a great resource, and they will provide many accommodations, and it's helped me a lot, which is how I was able to graduate from ASU. Thanks. That's all I have.
Yeah, and I'll add to that is by getting those network experiences and developing those connections with our friends and people that we've met along the way, we're better able to navigate the services that are out there, right? If you have a problem, accessing a resource, maybe someone else with a disability that has been there and done that and has accessed those resources can share with you what they've done to have a successful outcome. So by making those connections, either by volunteering in a group or being part of a self-advocacy group, that really has helped me at least and better get some of the services out there, just because I've got to learn from others on what has worked for them. And then, giving me advice on what I need to do to better be able to get the services that I need. I've got 5 more minutes or so. Is there any questions from the audience that you would like to ask us? You can go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can type it in the chat box. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank Jay and Calvin and David for being part of our presentation. Your information was very helpful, and remember that employment is not necessarily the first thing that you need to be worried about. If you can start with volunteering, it's a great way to build those connections and networks that eventually may lead to opportunities out there. So again, thank you guys for attending, and we're wrapping this one up. Thank you.